Dance Dance Revolution is one of my all-time favorite games. In fact, the game I actively play now is basically that, but on a keyboard. I still remember how attached I became to DDR when I was 8 or 9 years old, played it for many years after that, and still love playing the game whenever I have the chance to, despite not having many cabinets near me anymore. It's such an ingenious game that ever since its inception in the 90s, people will still see a machine and hop on with their friends for the sake of nostalgia, or just for some genuine, casual fun. It's the reason why a lot of rhythm games exist today, and I thank Konami for bringing such a breath of fresh air to the genre so early on. While I haven't had the chance to consistently play the game in years, I still follow the DDR game and community on and off to see how the game is being updated and what new players are on the rise, and will still play it on the rare occasion I'm able to. It's brought in so many talented players over the last few years, and the competition couldn't be more exciting to see at times, with players like Hibiki, Brosoni, Chris, Fafems, Hudson, Kevbo, Chunka, and so many more, duking it out on some of the hardest charts. Despite the immense passion from the community to always be hosting tournaments, promoting the game, and spending a good chunk of their hard-earned money per month on DDR cabinets at arcades, I always felt like Konami has had such a staunch disconnect from the DDR community at times, and fails to reward its players with quality content, functionality, and opportunities for them to further pursue or fix their game, as in comparison to its competitors, DDR is a complete laughingstock at the moment, and if it weren't for their brand, they would be toppled by now. Let's start with how unnecessarily expensive it is to be a long-term active player in Dance Dance Revolution. Sadly, it's difficult to emulate DDR to its most precise state, since it runs on frame-based timing as opposed to millisecond timing, and hardware isn't exactly easy to come by either at the moment, so your best way of practicing DDR is to show up to an arcade, swipe your card or put your quarters in, and get to work. For simplicity's sake, let's say it takes $1 USD to play a round, and we'll say you're playing 3 full songs on average. Now let's say it takes around 8 minutes per session on average, with the breaks and potential quitouts included. Assuming you've accumulated an hour, which honestly is lowballing a ton for most experienced players, you're paying about $8 a day, which is about $40 a week for 5 days a week, $160 a month, or $1,920 a year. Double or multiply that by 1.5 if you're a more active player, since I went with just an hour of playing for 5 days a week. After talking to Dr. D, I'd say my numbers are pretty reasonable, as he's paying up to $3 to $4 grand a year to pursue his passion for the game. I've always taken issue with Rhythm Game Arcade's culture's approach to just spending loads of money to play a rhythm game, given there are so many cheaper and just as fulfilling options at your disposal at home for long term that normally have far better content to offer too, even with licensing stuff aside. And no, calling them simulators is not an even remotely valid argument. Listen, it made sense to do stuff like this back in the day, but it feels like such an archaic approach nowadays to not provide a reasonable, affordable outlet for hardcore players to play their game for a much more reasonable price. You can even buy an entire In the Groove cabinet or get an SMX pad, and within a couple years, you will easily have saved money. This is where subscriptions come into play. Now, a game like SoundVoltex does have a subscription-based service within the cloud, but it's a lot different than the one I'm proposing, as it's a lot more simplified. I'm talking you pay a certain amount of money per month, and you can play as many DDR sets as you want. The only dance game that truly does this right at the moment is Rhythm Horizon, and before you get on me for it not being a public arcade game, let me further explain. I actually gave them a lot of shit when I was younger for them implementing what I realize now is a simple and affordable subscription-based service. Given the market they're entering and the amount of functionality and content is within the game, I think they cracked the code on what a dance game should truly be, and blows any other dance game out of the water in terms of price and quality. For $30 a year, not a month, a year, you get access to tons of content, and given what Matt showed me on stream and doing some research on my own, it is well worth it. Yes, you still have to buy or build your own pad, but it's far cheaper in the end still. If I were a 9-panel fanatic, I would be hooked on this game, and I suggest you actually check them out if you're interested. Konami needs to understand how dedicated some of their player base truly is, and with the access of EMU's passes, I feel like it's not impossible to implement some sort of monthly or yearly subscription-based service within the card, so you can just swipe your card, play however many sessions you want, and not consistently drain your wallet. And that goes for other arcade rhythm games too. Rhythm games require so much dedication and playtime to get good at, so I think this is a genuinely solid proposal that is possible to implement in the future, especially since there's no official way to play DDR at home. You might be saying, oh, but that incentivizes players to hog the machine even more, and Rhythm Horizon is a home game so you can play that however much you want. Listen, unless you're this disease of a person, I think a grand majority of people will sit out for a little bit to let someone else play, as that's just how general dance game courtesy operates. Even without a subscription, a rude person would just be throwing their quarters in to suffice. Even if it was $30 a month for a DDR subscription, compared to $30 a year for Rhythm Horizon, I bet people would still throw their wallets at Konami immediately still, so I urge them to look into something like that. My next point revolves around the charts DDR has to offer, and let's just say it's not that great. DDR charts for years have had so many ups and downs, but its lows are so embarrassingly low, especially by today's standards, and its ups are solid at best. Their criteria for charts is so unnecessarily strict, yet expressionless with its strange principles to not have any songs that are longer than 2 minutes, or barely crack 2 minutes, arbitrary difficulty caps, almost no concept of pitch relevancy, and just overly simplified charting approaches overall. Listen, I understand that Konami is primarily trying to cater to Brad, Chad, Haley, and Bailey, who had a few brews and want to bust a few moves to marshmallow songs at Dave & Buster's on some beginner charts, but Konami continues to leave their most dedicated players in the dust and offers them complete dog shit at times, especially leaving their best and popular players to compete on some of the worst charts imaginable. Valkyrie Dimension, Over the Period, Dead End Groove Radar Special, Endymion, Pluto the First. It's like a monkey created some of the sections in these charts and were released in the early 2000s for a shitty Stepmania pack, or located somewhere in the depths of the FFR's SimFile database. These high-end charts are hard for the purpose of being hard, and it's jarring that they just haven't learned yet and thinking that throwing 16ths around willy-nilly will make your chart interesting, whether it's a 14 or an 18. If you have to throw a turn mod on that isn't mirrored to score well on a chart, chances are your chart is at the bottom of the barrel. Not that turn mods outside of mirror should be rankable in the first place, but let's not get too carried away. The 17s and below run into these issues a bit less often than the 18s and 19s thankfully, but still feel fairly empty or uninspired overall. Let's take Life is Beautiful Expert for example. Not a bad chart, pretty consistent difficulty curve, friendly patterns, not too shabby overall. But listen to the song. There is so much going on in the background that there's just a challenge chart begging to be made for it. But why wasn't there? Why is this chart the pinnacle of the song's difficulty? It's just so formulaic. Just listen to some of the songs you play and ask yourself whether or not the charters are pulling the most expressive parts out of the songs and displaying it through a quality, nuanced chart. A lot of DDR's musical catalog is also littered with hyper-electronic tracks that restrict the game's ability to have song and skill diversification. I get that syncing is a lot easier with these types of songs, but I'm not saying you need to chart some offbeat krautrock song from the 70s. How many charts can you name in DDR that have tricky flams or polyrhythms in them? We can meme on the amount of double steps that plague DDR for like 3/4 of their charts, but it's not even worth it. Some might be saying that it's just DDR's style with the way Konami charts things, but when your style is fundamentally flawed and boring as hell, you might need to take some notes from other games that are making a complete mockery out of your chart quality. This more or less brings me to my next point, community involvement. I don't know who the person is that's behind the QA for approving all the charts in DDR, but either they need a new QA person, put new people behind the charts, or just do both. And you know who probably knows how to do that the best? The players. In the Groove, Eterna, all of the Osu games, A Dance of Fire and Ice, Clone Hero, all of these games allow community members to define what they feel is fun in a rhythm game, and they generally end up having better knowledge of charting practices than the people behind the original game. They let community members define what's fun and what isn't, and the result is normally a notable net positive. I'm not saying Konami needs to be completely out of the picture and not chart anything, but at least give others a chance. If community members were allowed to submit charts that would adhere to the selection of licensed artists they have at their disposal, I guarantee you they would be 10 times better than anything Konami themselves could ever churn out, and fans would gladly take the time to submit them if it meant enhancing the quality of their game. Let your most experienced and beloved players be involved with the charting process, because I can assure you, Konami, that you would be put in good hands if you just trusted your fans and let them do their thing. And not just with charting either. There are so many basic features that rhythm games have that DDR just hasn't bothered with for ages now. Note size, new note skin, song-specific searching, and so much more. The only unique thing DDR has added in forever is the addition of Hidden or Sudden Plus. Konami, let the people get involved, and the result would be enormous for the game. Lastly, I would like to touch on the Konami Arcade Championships. I was fairly vocal back when I had Twitter on how objectively bad the qualification standards are for KIC, but I never got to talk about how abysmal the tournament structure is either. To qualify, you have to obtain the highest score you can on 10 different songs by a set date. Pretty reasonable, and the song selections generally weren't too bad either. But how many people go? Well, 8 out of the top 10 people from 2019 were from North America, so probably a few of them, right? Not even close. It's 16 from East Japan, 16 from West Japan, 1 from Asia, 1 from South Korea, and 1 from North America. Again, 8 out of the top 10 spots were from North America, and I mean, they practically eviscerated just about everyone else. The qualification standards are so poorly constructed that the 54th person qualified over plenty of other contenders that had a far higher chance of winning and could put on such a better show. I understand that travel costs are quite expensive, but I guarantee you that most people, if given the chance, would gladly either raise money to go themselves or pay out of pocket and provide plane ticket verification by a specific date. Maybe there's still some liability issues with that, I have no idea. It wouldn't hurt to do something like with what Smash Summit did, where they raised money for tons of different players that had a chance to put up a fight against Melee and Ultimate's best. Maybe there would still be issues in that case, I don't know. But I feel like there's some proper solution to inviting your actual top competitors for a world champion title that you hold so proudly. The tournament structure itself makes no sense either, and functions as a qualifier rather than actual tournament matches. Playing 4 songs and totaling up the points afterwards is not a proper measurement of how good someone is even remotely, and is the least traditional tournament setup I've ever seen, and I think they do this for a grand majority of games in their championships. At least make the matches a best of 3, and also, I don't know if they've changed this or not, but let players warm up for Christ's sake. The fact that Chris had to play charts from memory on a handrail at one point shows how disorganized and out of touch this whole World Championship is. I also believe for the 2019 one, they had to play on a brand new machine they didn't even get to test out yet, or if anything they barely did, so some players, if they just happen to have different technique, were just completely thrown off by this change. How can you call this a World Championship when your best competition isn't even competing there, and the structure is horrible? Also, a quick side note before I end this, EX scoring sucks and basically encourages players to miss way more than they should, while the old scoring system punishes misses too much. Find a balance, fix it, thank you. Overall, I still love DDR in a way. It really does still hold a special place in my heart, as I love the game conceptually and would like to start playing somewhat again if I ever get access, but I struggle to understand how disconnected Konami is from their audience, and how little effort goes into rewarding their passionate fans. Why is this game over a decade behind content-wise and functionally compared to something like Simply Love and ITG or Rhythm Horizon? Why isn't Konami more transparent with any of this too, and stay in contact with players that market their game over and over again? ITG and Rhythm Horizon are very in-depth games, but they're also very accessible, so why does DDR choose to keep it so unnecessarily simple, and only care about players that don't care about the game? I'm not that active on social media ever, so maybe it's been brought up to an extent, but as it stands, DDR Extreme is arguably not far off quality-wise than in its current state, and that game is coming up on its 20th birthday. Maybe someday there will be some active measures to get the community involved, and let them at least try their shot at providing constructive and useful feedback that can make the game much more accessible to new players and veterans. But for now, I'm still extremely bittersweet about all this, but I'm hoping for the best that this will change sometime soon. Also, don't think we forgot about DDRV. That was pretty bad. Thank you to all my patrons for supporting the channel, and if you'd like to support the channel for more rhythm gaming content like this, feel free to check out my Patreon, drop a sub if you're new here, and check out my other links below. I'll see you all in whatever video I upload next, and take care.